Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Birds TV. Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan. ITB TV, of course, is powered by DraftKings, the number one rated sportsbook app. Download the DK Sportsbook app right now and start playing their online casino games. And when you do, make sure you use promo code ITB to get all of your sign-up bonuses. All right, Adam, we've got some stuff we're going to talk about. No guests today. We've got some things we want to get into, Eagles-related and NFL-related that we did not get into our last podcast. But if you haven't yet, you really should check out the last Inside the Birds pod. Of course, we were joined by our great friend and ITB favorite, Greg Cosell. We went through, and what we're doing is a 4-part podcast series where we're examining every team in the NFC East, from top to bottom, looking at how the Eagles match up with the other three. So we started off with the Giants. That is up and available on all your platforms. And by the time you're seeing this, the one on the Redskins might be up as well. If not, it'll be up soon enough. So then we'll go on to the Dallas Cowboys. And then, of course, we'll finish up with the Eagles. But, Adam, I think you would agree. It's not just, we're not just talking about like the star players and, what we expect from the team or what Greg expects. I mean, it's just like the draft. Greg just breaks down some of those unheralded but very important players from each team and from an angle that you don't always get. It's really very insightful.
Yeah, not only that, Geoff, there was a player that I had not heard of who actually might be their nickel defensive back. He noticed it from his tape study. So he picks up players, prominent players sometimes you don't know about, you don't see them, and you get, because you're getting it from all the same all 22 that the coaches and executives watch, you're getting a better idea of Daniel Jones, Darius Slayton, who we've talked a lot about in our show, Evan Ingram, obviously the running back, Barkley, their defensive front. What happened with Leonard Williams last season, and we got a really good idea because he Greg obviously studied for the draft years ago, so it's always a learning experience, and that's why we have them on, because these things are so good and they're not really time sensitive. That look, you could, if you're watching this, obviously months down the road in October, November, whenever they play the Giants, you could just go back to this interview we had, because he's giving you what their starting unit looks like. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure that you check out the podcast and listen to what Greg says. It's fantastic stuff. And again, we'll be doing it for a couple more until we do the entire NFC East. So let's get into our topics today, Adam. We have a couple of things Eagles related that we want to get into. And it's kind of funny. We've talked a lot about Jalen Reagor and what he can do being a first round pick and if he can pick up the playbook quickly. But I feel that you and I get asked about him, his role, his responsibilities frequently. So we commonly address it, but it's never bad to kind of go back, talk to people, get more information, and proceed further. So eventually he'll be signed. And, you would think that once everybody's able to kind of like collaborate in some form or fashion, and we're going to talk about that also on this edition. It's, the plan for him should be to hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure. Look, we've already said he's going to start. Obviously, Deshaun Jackson, it's funny. We did that show in May. It was a breakdown of the 53, and we also talked about Jalen Reagor on that show. That is our second or third most listened show since we've done the show Inside the Birds in the 2 years. Mm-hmm. It had a lot to do. You had some really good intel how on offense how he's going to be used, and what kind of role he could have on that side of the football. So let's move this forward, because the Eagles are going to have to make a decision in terms of special teams, because Geoff, he was either their number one or number two graded punt returner for this draft, I'm told. So He is scintillating. Folks, if you've not seen him on special teams returns, go to YouTube. You can see his TV copy of his highlight package, which is 8 or 9 minutes. And wait till you see, he had 2 touchdown punt returns last season for TCU. One of them, Geoff, was so good, it looks like it's a pinball machine. He's dodging the defenders. By my count, it was either 6 or 7 unblocked defenders that he beat. It was one of the best punt returns I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was great.
He is really exciting, Geoff. And I did want to mention that because we had not mentioned that before, that he may wind up returning punts for them.
That's a good point. And that's the one area, Adam, that I feel like, and you talk to scouts and you never know how that's going to translate over into the NFL the way it does in college, as opposed to some other traits. Because Deshaun Jackson was an amazing punt returner in college, and he's been an amazing punt returner in the NFL. You know who was also a very good punt returner in college, but to be honest with you, he was awful at it in the NFL? Jeremy Maclin. And I've compared those two based on their size, their speed, and their build, right? So Maclin was a punt returner in Missouri, and he was very good at it. But if you remember, he had a real struggle from his rookie on to second year, 2 year, three. He just was not a good punt returner at the NFL level. And I don't know. It's not like it's a scheme, right? It's just either you're good at it or you're not. And I don't know why it didn't translate for Jeremy.
Now, when it comes to Reagor, he had in his 3 years, he had 23 returns, 2 touchdowns last season. Average. Then this is where you know the guy was special. Mm-hmm. On his 15 returns, he averaged 21 yards per return. That's it. Your goal is to get 10 yards per return. So he was incredibly exciting. He only had 13 kickoff returns in his career, but he clearly adds some juice to that punt return role. And now that he's expected to start on the outside, the Eagles have to make a decision. Do they want him returning punts? Now with Deshaun, he was either feast or famine. You remember he would go backward a lot and he would drive you crazy.
Yeah.
Some of them were unbelievably exciting where you go, oh my God, there he goes. You didn't see him being able to run over the side like he did, but he would return it. But yeah, that's something they're going to have to make a decision on. I just wanted to bring it up because I know it's in the thought process. Whether they do it or not, it's going to be up to them. Plus, with all that he's got to learn, not having an off season, Geoff, that's just another layer that he could help them with. But time will tell whether they'll have him do it.
Yeah, let's quickly run through because you've always talked about how last year, right, they were one of the slowest offenses, if not the slowest in the NFL. And then a year later, you can say the same for return explosion. Let's go through some of their options to return punts. There's Deshaun, who they've used in the past, and they planned to do it somewhat last year, right? Even though he was older, they were going to make him a punt returner, but
and on that, I was told they asked him would he be willing because of his age, and he said he was willing to do it. So he would be one of them. Who else do you got there who could do it?
Well, you got Deshaun, you have Jalen Reagor that you just mentioned. I would think John Hightower is someone.
We'll get to him, but he can do it, but he'd be more on kickoffs. We'll get to him in a second.
Okay.
Greg Ward could do it.
Yeah, Greg Ward could do it. He's more of your steady, reliable than break a long one.
Exactly.
Boston Scott, can he do punts?
Yes.
I know he did kicks, but he can probably do punts. How about Prince Smith, the cornerback? I don't know much about his background, but he can fly. He's the rookie free agent corner that they signed.
Yeah, he can run. But again, his chances of making the team are slim to none. With the guys who are going to make the team, my sense it would be Reagor. The guys who would be under consideration would be Reagor, Ward. Who are the other guys that you mentioned?
Boston Scott.
Yeah, Boston Scott. Clement did not. He kickoff
Clement,
return.
No. Yeah, he was kickoff return.
Yeah, he was kickoff return. I don't remember returning punts, and those would be the guys I think would do it. So they have plenty of candidates. Now, when you mention John Hightower, that's what I wanted to mention because apparently his tape on kickoff returns was very intriguing. He had 36 returns at Boise over his 2 years. Remember, he was a junior college before that, and last season he averaged about 25 yards per kick, and he did have a kickoff return for a touchdown. That gives him a little bit of extra juice to make the roster. And obviously, if he dresses on game day, that's it. If you're going to dress him on game day, it's because he could kickoff return. That's kind of the way I see it. And
sure,
when you're a 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick, they always say the more you can do. Coaches love that. And the Eagles, not that every team isn't like this, but especially the Eagles, they're big on multiplicity. You've got to be able to, the reason why they've done so well with the Nate Herbigs and these guys who come out of nowhere is because they could play multiple positions, no matter what it is. Now you've got a guy like Hightower who's explosive. He's got size, and he can run, but he can kickoff return, and that will help him make the football team.
Absolutely. You just mentioned versatility and special teams are always big factors for those final 1 or 2 spots at every position. So if you're looking at John Hightower and if he's able to catch the ball, if he shows that he at least deserves a spot in that rotation or at the bottom, and then you start to factor in, well, he can return and he can play on special teams, a couple of units, then obviously that would be a big feather in his cap. So I think he's one of the guys that you and I talk about and fans talk about a lot, as a lot of intrigue. A 5th-round pick who could have been a 4th or a 3rd in some other drafts. He did have some character things, right, that knocked him down a little bit, but obviously there's potential there. He's one of those guys that you kind of get excited about.
Yeah, he's a little thin.
Right.
He's built like Darius Slayton. He's thin. He's over 6'1". He could fly. He's actually a pretty good kid. The knock on him from talking to personnel people around the league was his just the overall makeup of the guy. But as far as character, he's a good person. He needs to. There were just some things about him that teams had questions about, and as you also mentioned, he was a guy that in a deep draft probably fell down a little bit. The Eagles feel like they got a steal, but as you said, he's got to show it. See, that's the thing that we had talked about on our show last Monday, or Inside the Bird show, that the Eagles have an issue at receiver still. Yeah, they've added depth, but it's not certain these guys are going to dress on game day, like Hightower, for sure. Well, Greg Ward should make the team, but now he's got competition. We don't know when Jeffrey's going to be available. So these guys have to prove it in a situation where they did not have an offseason. So there's still a lot that's got to get developed here.
Yeah, one last thing I'll add on Hightower. I remember after the draft, the personnel source told me that they want to see some improvement from him on deep ball tracking. They didn't think it was his greatest asset in college, despite the really good speed and separation ability. So then I countered and I said, well, if he doesn't, could you see him being a vertical slot, a guy who, doesn't have to track the ball deeply? You get the ball a lot into his hands sooner. And they said, yes, they feel like that is a position that they would look at him at if he could not transition well to the outside. Now you think about slot. We've already said Greg Ward's probably going to play the slot in 3 receiver formations. Jalen Reagor might slide in there, but we've seen injuries hurt this team. So if Hightower winds up being someone they feel can play that slot, that's just another, area where maybe they find the best usage for a player. We have a lot to find out about John Hightower.
Yeah, I actually mentioned that a couple shows ago. They're looking at him inside, potentially as that. Basically, when you see what Aguilar did, when Aguilar played well, that's exactly the way they use him, as a vertical slot. And that's why his yards per catch inside was higher at some points during his career in Philly. And Hightower's kind of guy's just got to build his body up. And he's an exciting player. They've added so much speed here. You just hope that these guys know what they're doing in training camp. They're all the good thing about Watkins and Hightower and Reagor and JJ Arcega-Whiteside. They have a lot of competitiveness. You really like that. But each has their own challenges and the reasons why they dropped, particularly Hightower and Watkins. And then with JJ, before we move on here, obviously he had a foot injury. I believe he suffered it in the Detroit game. He never was right. He just we'll get it confirmed exactly what it was. It was either plantar fascia or turf toe. I know that for a fact. I just don't know which one it was. And when you have one of those injuries, man, you saw what Devontae Adams, who suffered the turf toe injury when he went off against the Eagles with like 150 yards or whatever he had. He was not the same until late in the season.
Correct.
Tyrell Williams had a plantar fascia injury with the Raiders. I actually wrote about this on InsideTheBirds.com. He suffered early in the season. He was never the same. So it's hard. We don't want to make excuses for Arcega-Whiteside, but we're giving you the answers of why. Now that he's healthy, he's got to be a factor.
Absolutely. I want to move on to one more rookie, Davion Taylor. We've talked about him a lot. Probably of all the rookies, maybe outside of Jalen Hurts, the largest bridge to gap as far as being ready to make an immediate impact.
Yeah. So year one, if he dresses, it'll only be on special teams. That's the feeling from the Eagles side. Year two, not only will you dress each week and play on special teams, maybe you start working in a nickel because and I'm going to get to why they drafted him. Third year, they want him to be a starting nickel linebacker. They drafted him to cover tight ends. This is a specialized role. Now, we could argue whether he could have gotten him later. That's debatable. But what's not debatable is what the role that they see him in, according to a couple of people I spoke with. Their vision is clear. We want this guy to cover tight ends. This league now, because of the rules, there's very little you can do to stop these tight ends. We saw it with Ertz, why Ertz is special. I mentioned Evan Ingram, Jordan Reed when he was healthy he had a couple games where he destroyed the Eagles. Obviously Gronk. You look at all the great tight ends. Mark Andrews in Baltimore, my God, he's a guy who just runs free. Sure. You need someone who's athletic and can cover him. That is why they drafted Taylor. By the third year, he should be a starting nickel linebacker for them.
Well, let's hope. I'm sure they hope that's the case.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Personally, drafting a specialized, I guess you'd call him a specialty player in the top 150 is a little bit of a roll of the dice, I would say. But if he does become what they expect him to become, then obviously the tight end is a big weapon in this game. So that would be right. And we'll judge it down the road when it happens. Yeah,
right. I do want to add though, Eagles are playing nickel 65 to 70% of the time. That is basically a starting player. Yeah. So that's how they equate it. You're not drafting that guy in the first 2 rounds, but if the guy's going to be on the field, it's like drafting a slot corner. Where do you draft them? 3rd or 4th round. That's where do they draft Maddox in the 4th round?
They drafted him in the 4th. Yeah.
Right. So you're going to draft a nickel player in 3rd or 4th round. I don't have a problem with that line of thought, but you and I had found out talking to other teams that other teams really graded him lower.
Mm-hmm.
And that because he's a guy that has not played a ton of football. Right. So the Eagles would have a leap of faith with this player by year 3 that he'll be on the field a ton.
Yeah, well, obviously a big job by the linebacker coaches. We'll have to really, really work with him. And unfortunately, and we'll talk about this in a second, the lack of time, that grass time that we talk about, hurts a player like him, maybe more so than a rookie who's played 3 or 4 years and is just a natural football player. All right, so that kind of wraps up the Eagles that we wanted to talk about. You had a notebook on InsideTheBirds.com, and you led off with something on Logan Ryan, the fact that he's still out there clearly. By far, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's the Devontae Freeman situation as far as money, although maybe a little bit, but you have 2 players in Freeman and Logan Ryan who are very good players who could help any team. And right now, the only reason they're unemployed seems to be because of financial reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Logan Ryan, he had a really good season in terms of statistical numbers. They used him kind of like he was a hybrid player, basically a safety, a slot corner, an outside corner. He played less outside corner than he had previously because he doesn't run well enough. He's a great guy, high character, competitive, smart, tough, everything you want. He is 29. He turned 29 in February. But you're right. He is by far the best corner out there. And he wants teams I spoke with that like him, $10 million. It's a non-starter for teams because you don't pay non-outside corners $10 million a season. You just don't do that. Right. Especially when they're in the twilight of the career. He's fairly durable, but if you're a team like the Jets who have interest and 3 or 4 other teams that have interest in him, how do you justify paying him $10 million when he's not playing on the outside? Outside corners are so valuable. Nickel obviously are as well, no question, but they don't make $10 million a season. They're between $5 and $7 million. So that, Geoff, is the reason why he's out there.
Do you suspect that guys like Logan and Devontae at this point are better off waiting for training camp to start, somebody to get an injury at that position so that the need for their services are a little bit more intensified?
It's a good point. And you know what? To me, because I know the Eagles, they want to bring in a veteran for 1 year and that's it, because we know Sanders is the guy. That's not even up to debate. The question is, in the Eagles' standpoint, when it comes to Devontae Freeman, how many carries could he handle? Because he's been hurt the last couple of years. He's not a great pass protector, though he really could catch the football well. He's just not great at blocking. Mm-hmm. Boston Scott really opened their eyes. He was a great story for them, and they want to see more of him. And I know, talking to a couple of people, that they really want to evaluate Elijah Holyfield. They really have a lot of love for this player. They just think that there's a lot there that not a lot of people know about. Well, to do that, Geoff, you can't pay a running back $3 to $4 million because if you do, that guy's got to be Sanders' backup, and there's Boston Scott's a non-factor, and forget about Holyfield. So they have to be very careful because when you pay a guy a lot of money at running back, you have to justify it, and you're not sure. If you're paying Freeman $1 million, well, okay, or Shady McCoy $1 million, that's a different story. Then Boston Scott could work in. Then Holyfield could work in. Maybe Clement works in. So that's kind of where it is. And you're right. These guys have to get realistic, and they may be
better off waiting till middle of August till some injuries are suffered.
Sure. Speaking of rookies, to get back on them, Adam, there's not a lot of first round picks who have been. There's not a lot of draft picks altogether.
Yeah,
that
I've never seen it like this. Yeah,
I have to think that the pandemic and the inability to get the players and the coaches together are somehow interfering with that process.
Yeah, I've talked to a bunch of teams about this and a lot of agents. The way I understand it is most teams are not signing rookies because they like to have their doctor kind of examine the player for the team physical. And it's like, because the players can't come in the building. The only players that can come in the building are players that could be rehabbed coming back from surgery. So you're seeing that there are a handful of players around the league that are in their complex working out alone to rehab their injuries. So if you're like, the couple dozen teams who are not signing players, although the Eagles did sign Prince Tega Wanago, but his situation, Geoff, as I understand it, as an international player, he's got to get his work visa. And to get that done, you got to get the contract done. You got to start the process early with him to make sure, because if you wait until the start of training camp, it may take a little bit longer to get that his ability to work here. So they got that done. Eagles were smart to get that done early. But just talking to a lot of teams, it sure seems like the teams are just waiting. They might as well, because the player, it's kind of like the coaches not being in the building. If you can't go in the building, with the players, what is the point of going in when you could just work remotely? Well, when I talk to teams, they're like, if we can't get our doctor examine them, why would we make this official when we can't pass them on the physical yet? So that's kind of
right.
To answer your question, that's been the story that I've heard for the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's really, I've never seen it. This is my 21st year of covering the NFL. I've never seen such a low number of draft picks signed around the NFL. It's pretty remarkable.
Well, what you said about, just how you're going to get people in there, that transitions nicely to what I wanted to finish up with. And that's, John Harbaugh was a little outspoken on this the other day when talking about it's an agreed upon protocol from the National Football League and the Players Association of health and safety regulations or steps or precautions they're going to take once training camp starts. And it was, I'm not going to bore everybody with all the details, but obviously they want players to report early. I think 7 days prior to the start of whenever their training camp is supposed to start. And I've already said that in my research, I think the Eagles would like to do 14 days prior to the start. We'll see. That's what the discussions were. So obviously they want early guys so they can test them. They want a 3-tiered system of personnel, right? Like players and coaches are in tier 1, and then administrators tier 2, and then other people who are around the team tier 3, to have different access into the building. And then of course the big thing is they want 6 feet of separation, Adam, in the locker room. And John Harbaugh's point was some of this is not humanly possible because once you're on the field and you're in the huddle and you're on the line of scrimmage, you're not 6 feet away from your teammate. That's humanly impossible, as he said, which he's right about, that part of it. But I mean, so I guess what he's wondering is, how is it beneficial to be socially distanced in the complex, but then once you get on the field, all rules go out the window?
Yeah, well, and Harbaugh's point is
look, it's football. You're going to have to, you have to get close. And I was talking to a position coach this week about what do you think of the memo that the league sent you guys? He's like, he gets it. He wants everyone to be safe. That this coach has kids, so he doesn't want to pick up something at the complex and bring it home to his family. But what he said was, here's the problem: when you have the large team meetings, you can't have them anymore because you can only have a certain amount of people in a confined area. You have to go by state regulations. So what he said was, he goes, what we're going to have to do is a bunch of our players are going to have to be on Zoom, but they're going to be in the complex, but they can't be in the meeting. He goes, this is where we're at right now. Like, we want you to be here, but you have to be in another part of our building on Zoom. And then the other problem is in the locker room. Geoff, you've been in the Eagles locker room hundreds of times. As you know,
90 guys in there with 6 feet of that distance.
Yes. I don't know how the hell you're going to do it.
You can't.
They're going to have to get it done.
You can't fit 50 guys in there with 6 feet of distance.
Look, I go so far back with the Eagles, Geoff. I was at the vet at the old locker room before they moved over in what was it, 03, 02, whatever the hell it was. That thing was awful. The vet locker room. It by the way, it could not be done in today's NFL if the vet still was there. You would actually have to tear down to make this work. you would have to tear down walls and just spread the thing out. Whereas now in the Eagles locker room is really big, but it's not that big. So there's some, look, they have to get it done, and they will. This new way of life is challenging. They've got enough to worry about, keeping everybody safe and healthy. And, you and I, Geoff, I kind of know we're not going to be able to, based on the memo, we're not going to be allowed in the locker rooms, at least for training.
Oh, God, yeah. No.
What I'm hoping, though, is I get to at least cover camps where we socially distance ourselves.
Right.
And I don't mind wearing the mask the entire practice. The wearing the mask does not bother me. I'm used to it. What I don't want to do is fly. That concerns me. I'd love to hear from people who've flown and what that's experience. If you're on our message board on Facebook, by the way, we went over 1,000 people, so we appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thoughts, whether you want to give them on Twitter or the message board. What's it been like to fly if you've flown lately? Because I've seen a video and pictures on social media. It scares me a little bit because I know people wearing masks, but like you would think airlines, Geoff, would take out the middle aisle, but they're all about profitability. I understand that. I just don't know how safe it is when people are sitting so close together.
Speaking of middle aisle, to give people an idea of how crowded the Eagles locker room is just during the OTAs, when you have upwards of 80 to 90 people in the locker room during OTAs, what the Eagles staff do is they put a row of lockers in the middle of the locker room. The locker room, if you could picture it, it's kind of rectangular from entry to end. It's rectangular. So you have two walls there. The lockers are on the sides of the walls. And in the middle is normally a walking path, but that walking path is taken away during spring because you have about, I want to say, maybe 12 to 14, maybe 16 extra lockers that are put in the middle because of all the players that they have on the roster. So that's not even counting the media. So that's why it's when I understand what Harbaugh says, it's humanly impossible to have 6 feet of distance in a locker room, but at the same time, the Eagles know this. Every team knows this. They're working on either modifying their complexes or finding different rooms, auditoriums, cafeterias. They obviously know what they have to do. It's just going to be very difficult. And I'll say this. I applaud Adam, the NFL, for trying to be as forward-thinking as possible. They're telling you that they're planning for a normal season. They came out with their schedule. Everything's normal. They even have a plan for full stadiums. They got a plan for half stadiums. They have a plan for a quarter stadiums. Sometimes, though, you watch them just kind of like this, right, with the blinders on, like we're going to have a season, and you wonder, are they burying their head in the sand, or are they trying to trick the fan into thinking that everything's going to be normal? The idea that this thing could fall apart within a finger snap, as we see the coronavirus cases now re-raising again across the country, to me, is very palpable. So we can talk about it. They can come up with these regulations. They can be as safe as they want. This is an uncharted territory, and I have no idea if we will have football the way we know it, even starting on time.
Hey, look, the Hall of Fame game
for now is on. But as you just mentioned, the COVID numbers are going up significantly in certain areas of the country. And that's what you worry about. Look, we're not doctors, but we're human beings here. We know enough about, I know you have, I have, a lot of people watching have. I've studied the numbers. I'm not a fearful person, but I'm also someone who is concerned about not only myself, and my wife. I'm concerned about others and how they're doing. And I know you are. You're a caring person. The NFL is trying to be as proactive as they can, but there's only so much you can control. But they're trying to control what they're able to control. Maybe they're overdoing it a little bit. And John Harbaugh, that's basically his inference. He respects, his quotes were great. He respects the process. He just doesn't. As he said, it's just impossible by the way that the conditions that they've given. But better be safe than sorry is pretty much it. And I hope people understand that this is not just the flu, which obviously is not. If it had just been the ordinary flu, the world would not be over 200,000 deaths so far. So
right. All right. So we will see. We will continue to update as we get information and we get closer to training camp. That will do it for this edition of Inside the Birds TV. I want to thank our friends at 97.3 ESPN.com and PHLSportsNation.com, both of them churning out great sports content. And thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. You can find his YouTube channel, Sports Talk with Broads. Catch the latest from the Inside the Birds podcast on any pod platform that you use. And as Adam mentioned before, make sure you check out the work on InsideTheBirds.com. We have a bunch of new stories up, including Adam's NFL notebook and a series previewing the NFC East by Andrew DeCecco. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you all on the next episode of ITB TV.